Many African countries are at least a decade away from achieving meaningful data sovereignty, hindered by persistent connectivity gaps and foreign control of digital infrastructure, according to industry experts. While nations like South Africa and Nigeria are continental leaders, widespread, reliable, high-speed internet remains elusive, especially in rural areas. A significant digital divide persists, with a large portion of the population lacking consistent internet access, complicating efforts to build and host local data services. High cost of deploying fiber optic networks across vast terrain further slows progress. Much of Africa's cloud capacity and data storage is still operated by global companies, meaning data often leaves the continent and falls under foreign legal jurisdiction. This undermines local economic benefits, technological autonomy, and national security. Despite growing attention and local data center projects, structural gaps in connectivity and infrastructure remain major obstacles. Now, joining us to further have this conversation and discuss what this data sovereignty and why it is so important for Africa, we have international journalist Eden Harris joining us now from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us, Harris. Good to have you. Now, your recent report highlights that many African countries may be at least 10 years away from achieving full data sovereignty. Can you explain what data sovereignty really entails in practical terms, especially for African nations?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, data sovereignty is gaining momentum, but for many countries, they're at least a decade ahead. My report basically points to, basically talks about what it means and where Africa is headed and how soon it can get there. South Africa and Nigeria, they are pulling ahead, while less connected nations remain held back from infrastructure gaps. So data sovereignty basically equals control, storage, and being able to process and profit from a country's data. So AI, digital IDs, financial infrastructure, and also national security.
Well, your report also highlights that Nigeria and South Africa are ahead. How did your research determine this, statistics showing that South Africa and Nigeria are currently leading the continent in that area?
Yeah, so I spoke to Spectranite CEO John Philip Fournier, who basically told me that he's currently working in Africa and Congo and several countries on the continent, and he basically said that based on his experience and what he's seeing in his interaction with different governments, less developed countries are 10 years away. But for Nigeria, based on his experience in South Africa, they will achieve it before others. While he didn't provide any specifics, he said that he was really confident that they would definitely get ahead and be able to connect more people to the internet and gain data sovereignty.
Even though we know that in Nigeria, there is still a huge gap when it comes to connectivity and data. Now, connectivity gaps were also cited as the biggest barrier. What kinds of connectivity challenges are we talking about here, especially for less connected African countries today?
Yeah, so when it comes to getting people connected to the internet, there are usually two ways to deploy, and it's through high speed. It's through wireless or fiber optics. However, a report from McKinsey basically says that over a dozen African countries are tapping into wireless options because it's less cheaper, it's faster, and it can definitely reach those peri-rural areas in certain countries like Nigeria or Kenya, where they can get people connected to the internet.
So are there specific infrastructure projects or innovation that you think could help these countries accelerate towards data sovereignty?
I don't think there's a specific project. I do want to note that when I was speaking to Fournier, he definitely said that there wasn't a lack of political will, and there isn't like anything that people are like doing to like stop progress. It's a matter of having like cost-effective measures put into place to get Africans connected to the internet.
You know, there's this popular saying that data is actually life. And we know that connectivity, we're in a global world, we're in a digital age. And you wonder how these connectivity issues impact ordinary citizens, especially local businesses in their day-to-day access to digital services.
Yeah. Many businesses thrive when they're able to connect to the internet. They're able to have better customer service. They're able to just be a person who controls their data, because within data sovereignty is power. It's a way to also get money when you're trying to sell it to like outside resources. Like a lot of companies like Google and Amazon, they have a lot of data centers which extract data from Africa. And what they do with that data is they sell it to people who want to maybe have a business in Africa. And when African businesses locally are able to control that, that's more money in their pocket.
I totally agree. But you also mentioned that the lack of progress is not due to policy intent, but the actual implementation. Could you elaborate on how governments are trying or maybe struggling to turn policy into action?
Well, there's 54 countries in Africa, so it's hard to like pinpoint exactly where or like what exactly that they're doing. But I just want to point to the fact that there is the political will to like get it done. I did speak to Fournier, and he did say that Congo, DRC, they are giving businesses grants to start to get connected to the internet. And that's a way that they're showing that political willingness to get people up and running on the continent.
So what role do you think regional cooperation across African countries play, especially as you've talked about the interconnectedness of these countries? How do we address these connectivity gaps as a continent?
It's a matter of cross-border coordination, being open to outsiders who want to come in and invest. One of the bottlenecks that Fournier pointed out was basically that it's really expensive to do fiber optics, so people are switching to wireless. And sometimes when folks are coming in and trying to invest in Africa, civil works like that process can be time-consuming. So having a process in place where they make it easier for outsiders to come in and invest.
Let's also talk about the private sector. How important do you think their involvement is, especially private sector and also international partners, in helping Africa achieve data sovereignty? You're in Washington, D.C. How do you think we can maybe improve things, not just locally, but also getting international partners to help?
Yeah, PPP, public-private partnerships, that's a critical way to get businesses off the ground. That's a critical way to get more digital data sovereignty. Like when private sector works closely with the government, amazing things can happen. And that's something that I've seen in my reporting when it comes to investing in Africa. Is basically outside businesses having a clear pathway to navigate different bottlenecks and countries, because as I mentioned, there's 54 countries in Africa, and with each country, there are different rules. So private sector collaborating with infrastructure leaders in Nigeria or in Congo and Kenya will make it easier for data sovereignty and the continent to get closer to owning their data.
So back to your discovery that South Africa and Nigeria are currently leading. What steps do you think that these nations have taken to advance their data infrastructure ahead of others?
Just being smart about how to get people connected to the internet. As I said in my report, in order to achieve data sovereignty, there has to be reliable connectivity, that reliable internet, and it's a matter of employing the best way to connect people. And again, that's through wireless FWA and choosing that most cost effective measure. Again, Nigeria is dubbed the Silicon Valley of Africa. So when private sector is looking to invest, they look to South Africa, or they're even looking to Nigeria because of the reputation and how committed they are to infrastructure and also to staying ahead as much as possible with other parts of the world.
Eden, I can tell you that in Nigeria, we still have very serious data connectivity issues. So your discovery is quite interesting one to get. But what would be your advice to policymakers in these less connected countries, especially to start closing the gap of data connectivity?
I wouldn't advise personally. I report into my reporting. I would say that based off my sources that I've spoken to, I spoke to Omar Arona, who's the former ambassador from Benin to the United States. And he basically says like he wants to continue to convene leaders, ministers, ambassadors, presidents in Washington, D.C. to come up with solutions on cybersecurity, solutions on how to get better control and move toward data sovereignty. So I would definitely say that.
All right, Eden Harris, thank you so much for this really elaborative discovery that you've made and on your research. Well done. Good job. Eden Harris she's been talking to us from Washington, D.C., and she is an international journalist.